UK in hung parliament. PM Theresa May loses majority, says will form government which provides certainty.
First at 9. This is Derana 24/7.
Sri Lanka upsets the neighbours. Kohli's India sunk in the highest Champions Trophy run chase. Foreign Minister in India, Sri Lanka will be to India what Hong Kong was to China, says Ravikarna Nayaka. Dengue medicine imports. GMOA questions the nationality of supplier of Dextran 40. Susantika's medal auction says an offer of around 250 million is on the table. In a shock result in Britain's snap general election, UK Prime Minister Theresa May, who sought a strong negotiating hand for Brexit, ended up weaker after the Conservative Party lost more than 10 seats. I'm Indivari Amuatta and we begin tonight's primetime news at 9 with your news from the United Kingdom. UK Prime Minister Theresa May's Conservative Party won the most parliamentary seats in yesterday's snap general election, but have shed the majority that May was gambling on extending. After the shock result, May said she would attempt to form a government with the support of Northern Ireland's Democratic Unionists that can provide certainty for the future, but this alliance will come at a cost. Meanwhile, Labour leader Jeremy Corbyn has called for the incumbent Prime Minister to step down after Labour has announced its intention to form a minority government after better than expected performances at the polls.
Theresa May's position as Conservative leader is under pressure after her gamble on an early election backfired spectacularly. Tory MPs were shocked and furious after the party lost much of its 20-point lead in the polls during the course of the campaign. The Conservative Party lost 12 seats, putting them at 318, 7 short of a clear majority. Speaking after visiting Buckingham Palace, May announced that she will form a government with the support of the Democratic Unionists, and only her party had the legitimacy to govern after winning the most seats and votes.
I have just been to see Her Majesty the Queen, and I will now form a government. And having secured the largest number of votes and the greatest number of seats in the general election, it is clear that only the Conservative and Unionist Party has the legitimacy and ability to provide that certainty by commanding a majority in the House of Commons. Our two parties have enjoyed a strong relationship over many years, and this gives me the confidence to believe that we will be able to work together in the interests of the whole United Kingdom. This will allow us to come together as a country.
It is thought May will seek some kind of informal arrangement with the DUP that could see it lend its support to the Tories on a vote-by-vote basis known as confidence and supply. The DUP has met to discuss what it has said is a messy situation, and the DUP leader has confirmed that she will enter talks with the Conservatives. Meanwhile, Labour has said it is also ready to form a minority government of its own after far exceeding expectations by picking up 29 seats in England, Wales and Scotland. The Labour Party secured a total of 261 seats, even winning Canterbury, which has been a Tory stronghold for over 100 years, and leader Jeremy Corbyn called for May to step down.
The Prime Minister called the election because she wanted a mandate. Well, the mandate she's got is lost Conservative seats, lost votes, lost support and lost confidence. I would have thought that's enough to go, actually, and make way for a government that will be truly representative of all of the people of this country.
Meanwhile, the Scottish National Party lost 21 of its previous 56 seats, but leader Nicola Sturgeon said the results were far worse for the Prime Minister.
This is a disaster for Theresa May. You know, she called an election clearly very arrogantly thinking that she was going to crush the opposition, sweep everybody aside and cruise to a landslide majority. You know, her position, I think, is very, very difficult.
The Liberal Democrats were able to add another 4 seats for a total of 12, but former Deputy Prime Minister Nick Clegg lost his seat in Parliament. With about 45.8 million people entitled to vote, turnout was up by 2% to 69%, the highest since 1997. In a hung parliament, incumbent PM Theresa May will stay in office and reside in Downing Street until it is decided who will attempt to form a new government. According to the cabinet manual, the incumbent PM is entitled to attempt to form a government, then stay in office until Parliament meets, when they can ask MPs to approve their Queen's speech, which is a list of laws the government hopes to get approved by the Parliament in the coming year. Parliament is expected to meet for the first time after the election on Tuesday, the 13th of June. The cabinet manual also says that an incumbent government is expected to resign if it becomes clear that it is unlikely to be able to command confidence and there is a clear alternative. That could allow Labour to argue that Theresa May should quit before a certain date if there is clearly an anti-Tory majority in the Commons that would inevitably reject her Queen's speech and support Jeremy Corbyn as PM. Corbyn would then have the chance to form a government which would put its Queen's speech to the Commons to see if he could win the support of a majority of MPs. Meanwhile, according to the EU Economic and Financial Affairs Commissioner Pierre Moscovici, the result of the parliamentary election in Britain will have an impact on the character of the Brexit negotiations the country is due to hold with the European Union starting later this month.
It doesn't call into question the fact that negotiations will be opened and we are ready to conduct them on a firm but friendly basis.
On the home front, Minister of Special Assignment Sarath Amunugama had this to say.
It is now clear that her job will be much more difficult, partly because of the sentiments of the voters and also the anti-Brexit lobby within her own party. However, we must remember that the Labour Party itself is in favour of the Brexit situation. They are not opposed to the leaving of Europe. Conservative policy, in a sense, as far as human rights and various controversial issues as far as we are concerned, is much more favourable, because the diaspora, some of the radical groups were strong supporters of Jeremy Corbyn. So while many of his policies are very good, very progressive, we also have to remember that had he won, Sri Lanka would have found it very difficult. And
we now have Other Derana's British correspondent James Reid commenting on the current sentiment from London.
It has essentially been a disaster for Theresa May. There's been talk, there's a lot of discontent in her own party. There's talk about how the campaign was robotic, how she didn't appeal to voters, how such issues as social care and ending of the triple lock pension especially have really turned voters away from voting Conservative. Contrast that to Jeremy Corbyn, who's obviously over the moon because he was essentially unelectable. He's really he's done vastly better than anyone would ever predict. With his campaign of fighting on a campaign of change, of increased social provision for renationalising industries even. So, I mean, again, over here it's I am finding it quite an amazing result because we have a very big issue of Brexit coming up. With a hung parliament, that's going to really complicate matters. If Theresa May resigns, who knows who's going to be the next Prime Minister. It's going to be a very exciting time over here.
Moving on to yesterday's Champions Trophy win for Sri Lanka. For many, it was unexpected, but for the Sri Lankan fans, it was sheer delight as Sri Lanka threw Group B wide open last night with a vital upset win against Virat Kohli's defending champions, India. Despite seeing India execute their batting plan perfectly after putting them in, the Lions rallied to pull off the highest successful run chase in the history of the Champions Trophy. The magnitude of the result is such that foreign media labelled India's defeat as the biggest shock of the tournament.
With neutrals and pundits predicting India to be the superior force before the game, the onus was on the defending champions as favourites.
Had a great win, against Pakistan the other day. Clinical win. They came out. They looked as though that they've got the right team. They've got some great balance with both batting and bowling, and I can see them going a long way in this tournament.
Shikhar Dhawan and Rohit Sharma got India off to an excellent start, putting on 138 for the first wicket. Lasith Malinga picked up both their wickets and the dangerous Virat Kohli went for naught. But Dhawan's century and a quick 63 from MS Dhoni took India to an imposing 321 for 6.
Be a boundary 100 for Shikhar Dhawan.
Despite Niroshan Dickwala falling early during Sri Lanka's chase, Danushka Gunatilaka and Kusal Mendes batted freely as they added 159 for the second wicket. Calamitous runouts threatened to derail the chase, with first Gunatilaka for 76 and then Mendes for 89 falling short of their crease. But Kusal Perera and Angelo Matthews continued where they left off. In a blow to Sri Lanka's immediate and long-term hopes, Perera had to retire hurt with 51 still needed. But Asela Gunaratne and skipper Matthews saw Sri Lanka home with 8 balls to spare.
Oh, that is a fantastic... And that will do it. A famous win for Sri Lanka at a famous old cricket ground. A win that keeps them in the tournament. Angelo Matthews raises his bat in triumph.
While Sri Lanka celebrated, Indian captain Virat Kohli was gracious in defeat.
If a team plays well, you have to take your hat off. If people's perception, we can't sit here and think of what people are perceiving us to be, or what people had expected of us as a team.
All 4 teams in Group B have 1 victory from 2 matches going into the final round of games, in which Sri Lanka face Pakistan and defending champions India meet South Africa.
Those were your top stories tonight on your primetime news. We will be back with more local stories after this short break. Do stay with us. Welcome back. In your top local stories tonight, Minister of Foreign Affairs Ravi Karnanayake says Sri Lanka would like to be to India what Hong Kong was to China. He said this in an interview with Padma Rao of World is One news website during his visit to India. Foreign Minister Ravi Karnanayake made his first overseas visit to India as the Minister of Foreign Affairs and met Indian Premier Narendra Modi and Indian External Affairs Minister Sushma Swaraj recently.
Responding to Padma Rao's questions about his meeting with Indian Minister of External Affairs Sushma Swaraj, Minister of Foreign Affairs Ravi Karnanayake went on to explain what was discussed between them.
At the end of the day, each country has its own self-interest. So Sri Lanka first, and we pursue how we got to get things done politically, diplomatically and economically. Commercial diplomacy has come to stay here. We would like Sri Lanka to be to India what Hong Kong played a role into China. Now it's one of the same.
Rao then raised the question of giving 80% of stakes in the Hambantota port to China.
Doesn't India trade with China? And we will ensure that China is given its share, but India plays a role that is there. The Hambantota port was first offered to India. Why didn't India take it?
Rao then asked Minister Karnanayake whether Sri Lanka is ready to be a significant partner of the One Road, One Belt initiative of the Chinese president in the backdrop where India boycotted the recent summit in Beijing.
As you know, the shipping line that we have been there has been there for the last 2,500 years. Sri Lanka is a pivotal point, and in the international shipping route, you cannot do a route without Sri Lanka. So we got to leverage our best out of it and ensure the maximum comes along.
When the minister was questioned on international allegations regarding human rights violations in the country, this was his response.
Now I think the world has realized that we are a country, that democracy is absolutely important. We believe in the international community go along, but Sri Lanka's sovereign interest comes first. We believe that, our armed forces have done what they got to do, like what is happening in UK, like what is told by the American president, and while all other areas where terrorism has inflicted today to them, which was unknown to them then. So I'm sure they are realizing what we went through 30 years.
And in Parliament, a debate was held on the obstacles faced during the distribution of relief and the impact of the recent disaster on the country. Many parliamentarians and ministers expressed views regarding the matter.
The main question is, does our disaster mechanism exist just to distribute relief aid after a disaster occurs? If not for the media networks and the public's intervention, those affected would still be starving. Minister Vajra supplied relief aid only to the Gold district under his ministry, but it was not supplied in the Mathura district.
The relevant institutions are working under their identity. The Ministry of Home Affairs will work under its identity.
But under the purview of Home Ministry, you only worked for Gold district. Galle was not the only disaster-affected area.
Media institutions led by Derana spearheaded efforts. Even the army did their part. We should honour the efforts of those that got into the water to rescue people.
We launched a satellite named SupremeSat by spending millions under the former government. It was said at the time that this satellite would give information not only about South Asia but also about the Southeast.
As I know, we cannot get all the information by launching a satellite.
The Government Medical Officers Association urges the government to recruit a supplier from Thailand for Dextran 40, a drug used in the treatment of dengue patients, as the current supplier is an Indian company whose product lacks quality. The Secretary of GMOA expressed his views on the matter at a media briefing today.
Who are the registered suppliers of Dextran? Is it an Indian or Thai company? It should be a Thai company. The director of the dengue prevention program said that he will not use Dextran from India, but allegedly the official supplier of Dextran is still an Indian company. The director of health services clearly says that new supplies of Dextran 40 are to be imported via the World Health Organization and not from a Thai company. This is not sustainable in the long run. Therefore, Dextran 40 should be imported from Thailand.
And in your top story tonight, Olympic silver medalist Susantika Jayasinghe claims that she has received an offer of around 250 million rupees for her medal. She told media today that there are also several other offers for her medal from foreign buyers.
Susantika Jayasinghe recently stirred up controversy by announcing her plans to auction her Olympic silver medal. Minister of Sports Dayasiri Jayasekara, however, denied allegations that his ministry has stopped paying her salary.
The ownership of an Olympic medal belongs to the sportsperson. It is an international law. It is impossible to change the law and the ownership. It's 250 million rupees. I know it is valuable. I received calls from Japan, India and England, but I am in no hurry to sell it. Yes, I said so. We can invest in the development of sports.
We'll be back with more local stories after this short break. To stay with us. Phase 2 of the Manusat Derana humanitarian campaign will commence tomorrow, endeavouring to aid children affected by the floods and landslides.
Phase 1 of Manusat Derana reached out to the thousands of disaster victims, aiding them and providing them with relief. Manusat Derana now moves into Phase 2 in order to fulfill the educational needs of children affected by the disaster. From tomorrow onwards, you will have the chance to lend them a helping hand. You can donate school bags, school uniforms, exercise books, pens, pencils and 1,000 rupee vouchers for school shoes from DSI or Bata to the Derana head office at number 320 TB Jamawata from 8:30 am to 4:30 pm tomorrow and on Sunday.
In your business stories tonight, the Export-Import Bank of Korea will provide a $200 million loan to Sri Lanka at 0.15% interest to build a traffic bypass tunnel in Kandy. The low-interest loan, given at a rate below the American inflation, will be given from Korea's Economic Development Cooperation Fund. The loan comes with a 10-year grace period and 40-year payback period. The Korean embassy said today that the bypass tunnel will ease congestion in Kandy and cut down the transit time from Sudupola to Tannikumbura from the current 2 hours to less than 30 minutes. The embassy also added that it will reduce air pollution near the historic Temple of the Tooth and help speed up transport exports from industries to Kandy. From the Colombo Bourse today, the all-share price index gained 4 points to close at 6,668, while the S&P SL20 index gained 7 points to close trading at 3,840. Market turnover was less, or rather relatively low, at 535 million rupees, 54% of which was foreign participation, with foreign investors being net buyers of 131 million rupees. We now have the daily market update with Imeshi Fernando from the Colombo Stock Exchange.
Top 5 gainers of the day were Raklanka Finance, Central Investments and Finance, Mala & Phipps, Bukit Dara and Asia Asset Finance, while the top 5 losers were Harish Chandra Mills, Berwala Resorts, Trade Finance, Tess Agro Non-Voting and Swarna Mahal Financial Services.
And during the week, the all-share price index declined by 0.3%, while the S&P SL20 index closed flat. Average turnover gained by 5% week-on-week to 871 million rupees during the past week. For a detailed picture of how the markets performed during the week, here's Upul Athapattu from NDB Securities.
SPI decreased by 0.3% during the week, mainly due to price losses in counters such as Nestle Lanka, Raklanka Finance and Ceylon Coal Stores. Meanwhile, S&P SL20, which represent the blue chip counters, closed flat for the week. Diversified sector recorded the highest sector turnover during the week, whilst the second highest was seen in the bank, finance and insurance sector. Furthermore, total foreign purchases boost the weekly turnover, where total foreign purchases accounted for 68% of the total weekly turnover. This resulted foreigners closing as net buyers for the week, creating a net foreign inflow of 684 million rupees. Total year-to-date net foreign inflow at the end of the week amounted to 19.6 billion rupees. Out of the weekly turnover, block trades accounted for 16%, which was a lower figure than last week.
And the Sri Lankan rupee traded steady today due to offset dollar demand from importers. Dealers said there is optimism over expected inflows in the form of international assistance, which could help offset potential downward pressure on the local currency. Rupee forwards were active, with spot next forwards trading at 152 rupees and 85 cents to 95 cents per dollar, unchanged from Wednesday's close. Here's a look at how the rupee traded against other major currencies during the day. Coming back to sports stories, Sri Lanka cricket announced today that Kosal Janit Pereira's participation in the ICC Champions Trophy has ended due to injury. Pereira retired hurt during last night's win against India, and preliminary medical investigations revealed a possible lateral mid-hamstring injury. Having already drafted Danushka Gunathilaka in after the untimely injury of Chamara Kapugedara on Wednesday, Sri Lanka will fill in 25-year-old all-rounder Dhananjaya De Silva to join spinner Dilruwan Pereira as the squad's third standby. And Romania's Simona Halep is now within one win of her first Grand Slam title and the women's #1 ranking as she advanced into the final of the French Open last evening. Her opponent is unseeded Jelena Ostapenko of Latvia, who celebrated her 20th birthday in style with a 3-set win against Timea Baksinski.
After having to come from behind in the quarterfinals, Simona Halep led from the front against second seed Karolina Pliskova. Halep lost to Maria Sharapova in the final of the French Open 3 years ago and will have a chance to make amends after her 6-4, 3-6, 6-3 win against Pliskova. Meanwhile, world number 47 Jelena Ostapenko has become Latvia's first major finalist. Ostapenko edged the first set and then lost the second against a confident Timea Baksinski, but surged ahead late in the decider to win 7-6, 3-6, 6-3.
And bringing to you the developing story from around the world. Qatar's Foreign Minister Mohammed bin Abdullah Rahman Al Thani alleges that the blockade of his country amid a major diplomatic rift with several Arab neighbors is a violation of international law. Speaking at a joint press conference with his German counterpart during a visit to Germany, the minister added that there was an attempt to mobilize international opinion against Qatar. Saudi Arabia, Egypt, the United Arab Emirates, Bahrain, Yemen, Libya, the Maldives, Mauritius, Mauritania and Senegal have shut down diplomatic ties with Qatar, with Jordan and Djibouti downgrading diplomatic relations with the country.
Addressing media in Germany, Qatari Foreign Minister Mohammed bin Abdul Rahman Al Thani criticized a joint statement issued by Saudi Arabia, the United Arab Emirates, Egypt and Bahrain, branding 59 people and listing 12 entities, among them Qatari-funded charities, as having terrorist links.
This list mentions people and organizations which to a large extent don't have any relations to Qatar, as well as non-profit organizations that are internationally recognized and work as advisors for the United Nations. This is a terror list, somehow used as a means to political hostage-taking.
Meanwhile, Egypt has called for the United Nations Security Council to investigate accusations that Qatar paid a ransom of up to $1 billion to a terrorist group active in Iraq to release members of its royal family kidnapped during a hunting trip in southern Iraq. Qatar has denied trying to pay ransom money to secure the release of the abductees. Bahrain has warned its media outlets not to publish or circulate anything that condones or justifies Qatari policies. The country's Information Affairs Ministry stated that any expression of sympathy with the government of Qatar or opposition to the measures taken by the government of Bahrain through any form of communication is a criminal offence punishable by up to 5 years in prison and a fine. Meanwhile, Qatar's Al Jazeera media network said it was suffering a cyber attack. The network has been in the crosshairs in the current dispute, with Saudi Arabia ordering all tourist facilities to remove Al Jazeera from accessible satellite channels.
We don't interfere in anybody's business, we just report. Al Jazeera's editorial policy is going to continue the same regardless of what happened with this event.
It's time now to take a look at the weather forecast for the next 24 hours. We cross over to our weather centre.
Now, with the wet weather to continue at several places in the island, particularly in the Sabragamo central and northwestern provinces, as well in the Kalutara and Colombo districts, as well as Gampa, Gaul, Matra, Putlam and Kurunagala districts. As you can see in the map, there is a build-up of a low pressure zone over the northwest part of the island, bringing fairly strong winds of over 50 kilometers per hour. But we can expect gloomy weather to continue until the following day, with sunny weather expected soon. With that in mind, let's now take a look at the city-by-city forecast.
And that's all from the news for tonight. But before we go, we'd like to leave you with visuals from Australia to be mesmerised by an array of lights and colours at the Vivid Sydney Light Festival held recently. Over 180 local and international artists created vibrant light installations illuminating iconic buildings and landmarks throughout the city. Have a pleasant evening. Good night.
Information 24 hours a day. This is Sri Lanka's premier news channel, Derana, 24/7.